Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, we're preparing a course and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant His fruition. A course which is a very important topic, the legal theory, the principles that build the Hanafi school of thought. Now, of course, many of us, we know that usually the Jumhur, meaning the Malikiyya, Shafi'i, and Hanabila are going in one direction and the Hanaf somehow find themselves in the opposite direction. And that does raise a question mark as to why is it the case that the Ahnaf are usually differing. So inshallah, through this course, we're going to be going through the secret or what goes through the mind of a Hanafi jurist as he is deriving and extracting commandments from the Quran and Sunnah. So what are the principles that are building up this school of thought? As we see it, it's a really important school of thought, one that's practiced all across the globe, and many Muslims adhere to it. And as a student of knowledge, it's very important in general to study legal theory, but especially when it comes to the Hanafi school of thought. Now, just to give a brief overview of the course, we are actually going to be using a work that I myself have been putting together for the past few years. And the reason behind that was that for the longest time, usually the first primer, the first work that was mainly taught in Hanafi institutions to students of Usul was Usul al-Shashi. Usul al-Shashi. It's a very famous work, very commonly practiced and studied work globally, worldwide. However, Usul al-Shashi had a few issues, and it was a very convoluted book and maybe not the best work for the beginner student. And because of that, Mufti Sa'id al-Palanpuri rahimahullah ta'ala, not too long ago, he wrote a more concise, basic version for beginner students, which was called Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl. However, Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl as well, because it was a concise, abridged version of Usul al-Shashi, some of the same problems that were found in Usul al-Shashi are found in Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl as well. For example, and this is something in general in the Hanafi books of Usul, we usually don't have any muqaddimat. So you'll see right after you open the book, it goes straight into al-Bab al-Awwal fi Kitabillah, regarding the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, directly going into the discussion of khas and am. Whereas the books of Jumhur, as well as the later books of the Hanafiyya, so we're talking about level 4, level 5, at-Talwīḥ al-Tawdīḥ, Musallam al-Thubūt, the books that combined the two different methods that are found in Uṣūl al-Fiqh. These books do have many preliminary discussions before you actually enter into the core discussions and concepts of Uṣūl al-Fiqh. Like for example, firstly starting off, what is the definition of Uṣūl al-Fiqh? What is Uṣūl al-Fiqh? Why do we study Uṣūl al-Fiqh? What's the benefit of studying this science? And so on and so forth. A number of preliminary discussions that you will find in the beginning of the books of Jumhur, as well as the beginning of books like Musallam and al-Talwīḥ, the books that compiled based on al-Jam' bayn al-Tariqatayn. You'll find these discussions. Usually you don't have that in the beginning of Uṣūl al-Shashi and Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl. That we've incorporated in our course. Also, the order as well in Usul al-Shashi and followed by Usul al-Shashi, Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl, is not necessarily the best order. Some of the later books of the Hanafiyya, such as the author of Mir'āt al-Uṣūl, Mullah Khusru, and other scholars as well, they've changed up the order slightly to make it a bit better. And inshallah ta'ala, we will also be tweaking the order a little bit in order to make the mabahith, the discussions presented in a more suitable manner for Hanafi students. Another really important point, which is very important actually, and I would advise every Hanafi student to be very considerate and careful of this, is that in order to understand the discussion, one must have proper tasawwur, proper conceptualization, and a complete holistic understanding of the discussion that he is trying and attempting to learn and understand and implement. Usul al-Shashi many times leaves out very core and important matters that are meant to be discussed in these discussions. Like for example, a student will study the beginning portions of Usul al-Shashi, khas and am. Let's just take khas and am for example, without actually learning the sigh of umum. And so if you give this student, after he has studied khas and am, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you open a random page and you say, okay, tell me which words are am, which words are khas, they might not be able to recognize them, simply because they were not exposed to the sigh of umum. Yes, in the mutawwalat, such as Usul al-Saraqsi and Usul al-Bazdawi, you find the sigh of umum and khusus. However, because Usul al-Shashi was meant to be a concise, abridged version of Usul, the author, he left out this discussion. Now, for a beginner level student, this is important, because this is in the process of building the foundation, the ta'sil, in order for this beginner level student to be able to actually learn and experience usul, and not just on a theoretical or on a very dry basis, but rather actually experience it and be able to engage with it and feel it and see it as it comes into existence around him. Likewise, a famous discussion in the beginning of the books of Usul, العام الذي خص عنه البعض والعام الذي لم يخص عنه شيء. That am from which something has been specified or nothing has been specified, and the hukum, or how we treat that type of a word. That was mentioned, but the process and conditions of takhsis, which is really the main difference between the Ahnaf and Jumhur, this wasn't mentioned. It wasn't discussed. And so again, there are core matters of these discussions that are actually left out in Usul al-Shashi and by extension Mabādiʻ al-Uṣūl, simply because the book is meant to be a very abridged, concise version of the Mutawwalat. Inshallah, in our course, we're going to be elaborating and making sure that the most important discussions, the most important core fundamental discussions are held, and a student is taught those important discussions bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. All of that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, along with adding discussions towards the end. For example, the adilla mukhtala fiha, the topic of istihsan, a very important topic for Ahnaf, istishabul hal, likewise the topic of qawl al-sahabi, and likewise ijtihad, the shurut of ijtihad, and so on and so forth. Different things that you'll find in some of the later books of the Hanafiyya that are usually left out in beginner level courses. We're going to be incorporating all of that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and that's what makes this course special. It's not only a course for beginner level students, even students, many times this actually happens, students study the Hanafi usul, but they come out thinking that I don't really understand what's going on. Or there's a lot of holes and gaps, and they're not able to really grasp why that's taking place. Inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we prepared a very comprehensive course. Everyone's requested. Join us, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and you will see the benefit. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.